Hello, welcome to A Book a Day. Today we will discuss a book called Scarcity with the subtitle, Why Having Too Little Means So Much. The book is 258 pages long, and I will spend approximately 23 minutes sharing its essence with you, so we can understand how the mindset of scarcity leads to our poverty. The book has two authors, Sendhil, an economics professor at Harvard University, and Elder Shafir, a psychology professor at Princeton University. Through their long-term research and poverty alleviation experiences, the authors discovered a phenomenon where the poor become poorer and the rich become richer. We used to think that this gap was caused by the rich having extra money to invest, the ability to provide better education for their children, a different platform, a different perspective, and access to different human and material resources. In short, various external factors contribute to the poor becoming poorer and the rich becoming richer. However, the authors propose another viewpoint. They believe that those who are trapped in long-term poverty, even if given a sum of money, will often end up bankrupt due to their financial management, thus remaining in poverty. It's worth noting that the authors use the term poor not only to refer to a lack of money, but also a lack of time, knowledge, skills, or even good interpersonal relationships. A state of feeling scarce in resources can be called poor. The authors find that long-term poverty can lead to a scarcity mindset, which is the root cause of the poor becoming even poorer. Therefore, understanding this scarcity mindset is crucial for the poor who want to escape poverty. So what is scarcity? What are its harms? We will discuss the book in terms of the composition of scarcity, the harms of scarcity, and methods to prevent scarcity from arising. Let's first look at what scarcity is. The scarcity mentioned here is not an objective material scarcity, but rather a scarcity mindset. For example, when there is an imminent deadline for a task, a person may feel a sense of urgency. Suppose you must complete your work and tasks every Friday, and by Thursday, you still haven't finished. In this case, you'll feel anxious and start to work with full concentration. Nothing can distract you because completing the task is the most urgent matter. Everything else can be put aside in comparison. You enter a state of complete focus, only paying attention to the work at hand. This is when you enter a state of scarcity. After hearing this example, you might think that the state of scarcity is a good thing because it can help us complete tasks more effectively. In fact, it does have this benefit. It brings a focus dividend. The focus dividend refers to the intense concentration and heightened attention during a short period, enabling us to work productively. With the help of the focus dividend, we can make the most of our remaining resources. For example, when the deadline for your work is approaching, you will feel a continuous sense of urgency and usually finish the job in one go at the last minute. Another example is a box of chocolates. You always feel that the last few pieces are the most delicious. Or in the final days of a vacation, we tend to cherish our time even more. These are all focus dividends brought to us by scarcity. However, while this kind of focus can bring certain benefits in the short term, it is not a good thing to be in a scarcity mindset for an extended period. It can drag a person into poverty and a vicious cycle of deprivation. To understand this cycle, we need to first look at the consequences of scarcity. Scarcity usually produces four effects. The first is the tunnel vision effect. It's like looking through a tube, where you can only see what's inside the tube, and you can't see anything outside. This term is often used to describe a person's short-sightedness and narrow-mindedness. Once we face scarcity, we tend to focus our attention on the most pressing matters, which often leads us to overlook the truly important things, the very things that can pull us out of poverty. The authors give an example of firefighters in the United States, who frequently enter emergency situations. When there's a fire alarm, firefighters are required to put on their pants, jackets, shoes, and grab their equipment within 60 seconds before jumping onto the fire truck and rushing to the scene. You might think that most firefighters die at the scene of a fire. In fact, statistics show that 20–25% of firefighters who die on duty perish on their way to the fire scene, with some accidents occurring due to collisions between fire trucks and other vehicles. The number one cause of their death in traffic accidents is not wearing a seatbelt, accounting for nearly 80% of the total accidents. It sounds incredible, doesn't it? Firefighters are usually well-trained, so how could they neglect something as simple as wearing a seatbelt? This can be explained by the tunnel vision effect. When they receive a fire alarm, they enter a state of time scarcity. They have to prepare in a short time, devise firefighting strategies on the road, study the structure of the fire scene, calculate the number of hydrants, and estimate the size of the fire. All of these can cause important but routine matters to be neglected. The tunnel vision effect changes the way we make decisions. For example, you might be in the habit of going for a run every morning, but if you have a lot of work to do these days, you may feel that running is not so important anymore. Finishing your work is the most important thing, and missing a run for a day or two won't have much impact. However, in the long run, investing in your health is the most important thing. You surely know this, but in a state of scarcity, you will make a decision that harms long-term value. For instance, let's do a thought experiment. Now think about what other things are white besides milk. How many kinds can you come up with? You probably won't think of more than 10, but there is a way to reduce the difficulty of this experiment. Remove the word milk from the question. If I simply ask you what things are white, you might think of moonlight, foam, ivory, and various other things. However, if I ask what is white besides milk, the qualifier milk will inhibit your thoughts. You can try it out. This is a common example of inhibition in psychology. Excessive focus on one thing can inhibit competition, like when you're angry with someone, and the inhibition effect makes you ignore all their good qualities, making you angrier the more you think about it. So scarcity leads to the tunnel vision effect, causing us to focus only on the urgent matters within a narrow range, ignoring anything outside the tunnel, no matter how important. This keeps you trapped in a constant state of emergency. The second point is that scarcity can lead to borrowing, where a person habitually overuses future resources. For example, credit cards are very popular nowadays, and if you have used one, you should know that it can be a bottomless pit. Once you've overspent on your credit card, you essentially won't have cash on hand anymore. Every month, as soon as you get paid, the money is immediately used to pay off your debt, keeping you in a constant state of scarcity. If an emergency arises, like needing to give a generous gift for a friend's wedding, it can be very difficult to cope with that month, as the interest on overdue credit card payments is usually very high. Another example is high-interest loans. The authors found that the poorer people are, the more likely they are to take out high-interest loans, and once they do, they are not far from bankruptcy. You may ask, don't these people know that such high interest rates will ruin their finances? Of course they do, but compared to the current emergencies they face, those are future concerns. They may think that there might be a turnaround in the future, and they usually borrow with this mindset. Borrowing here does not only refer to money. Busy people often borrow time as well. For example, not finishing work this week and pushing it to next week, then pushing next week's task to the week after, which keeps them in a state of scarcity. This state causes a person to completely overlook other methods that could save them, such as time management, energy management, or improving work efficiency. In the long run, borrowing will make a person even more impoverished. The third point is that scarcity leads to a lack of leisure, meaning there's no extra time and space. For example, if you're going on a trip and have a suitcase to pack all your necessities, toiletries, clothes, digital devices, and some trinkets. After packing, you find there's still some space left, so you can stuff in some not-so-essential items like magazines or snacks, making the whole process enjoyable and quick. However, if your suitcase is small, it's not as comfortable as before. You start to weigh your options and make comparisons thinking, should I bring this or not? You can't fit many items in to make space. You might have to take everything out and start over. You keep trying different arrangements until the suitcase is completely full. At this point, you might think that this method seems more space efficient. But do you know how much energy and time this process consumes? The reason why poor people often feel exhausted in life is because of the excessive weighing and comparing involved in their decision-making process. They agonize over spending $1 or using a bit of time, always considering whether it would be more effective if used elsewhere. This seemingly efficient mindset actually creates a significant mental burden, consuming attention and energy, further resulting in the tunnel vision effect, causing them to focus only on the immediate matters and neglect what's truly important. So leisure becomes especially important here, as leisure refers to the leftover, unutilized time and space. Let me tell you a story the authors mentioned in their book. There was a hospital that was always worried about not having enough operating rooms every year. The hospital had 32 operating rooms, but had to accommodate more than 30,000 surgeries annually. The operating rooms were always fully booked, and they often had to take on emergency surgeries. The doctors dreaded this situation because an emergency would disrupt their schedules, pushing the planned dates back. They were constantly filling the gaps left by unfinished surgeries from the previous week. In this way, the entire hospital was always in a state of emergency and scarcity. Everyone was rushing, and you can imagine the long hours the doctors worked. They are human too, and their bodies can't handle it. Work efficiency declines, and error rates soar, forcing the hospital to pay high remedial costs for surgical errors. So how can this problem be solved? You might say, why not just build more operating rooms? But in theory, no matter how many operating rooms you have, there will always be more demand for surgeries than available resources. So what to do? They hired a consultant to offer advice. After understanding the situation, the consultant simply said, it's easy. You have 32 operating rooms, right? Reserve one for emergency surgeries. The hospital's management was not happy about this, thinking that they were already short on space, and now they had to leave one room unused, which would be wasteful. The consultant didn't say much, just suggested they try it. As a result, the hospital found the approach to be effective. The surgery admission rate increased by 5%. The number of surgeries scheduled after 3 p.m. decreased by nearly half, and the surgical error rate dropped significantly. Why did this happen? This is the benefit of having leisure. The consultant discovered that the hospital surgeries could be divided into 2 types, planned and unplanned. The planned surgeries were already occupying all the operating rooms, and any unplanned surgeries would disrupt the entire schedule. However, the hospital never considered the cost of changing this schedule. What costs? First, there are financial costs, such as overtime pay for doctors, as well as medical costs. For instance, if a doctor makes a mistake during surgery that results in a medical accident, the hospital has to pay compensation. Additionally, there are efficiency costs. Doctors working overtime every day take longer for each surgery and become less efficient. The total costs end up being enormous. Once you look at these costs, you'll realize that the scarcity of operating rooms is not due to space scarcity, but the inability to handle emergencies with the available rooms. The solution is to reserve one room so that emergency surgeries won't disrupt the regular schedule. All the previously mentioned costs can be saved, and the hospital can escape the state of scarcity, working in an orderly manner. This situation is very similar to that of a heavily indebted poor person. Poor people have a low ability to withstand risks, and any minor issue will send them into a state of scarcity. For example, if they're using their monthly income to pay off the previous month's debt, the costs are actually extremely high. In fact, many systems rely on a certain amount of leisure to function properly. I don't know if you've ever seen old cassette tapes, but there's a blank section at the end to ensure the entire tape won't break, giving the tape a longer lifespan. For example, a washing machine won't spin if it's too full. You have to leave some space for it to spin properly. Or take cars on the road. If road occupancy exceeds 85%, traffic jams are 100% guaranteed. As soon as the number of vehicles reaches a certain level, traffic jams are inevitable because if one driver slams on the brakes, all the drivers behind will have to stop too. Therefore, leaving some leisure in any system is crucial. It's not a waste of resources, but a guarantee for more efficient operation. From this perspective, the essence of scarcity is the lack of leisure. Leisure may not make a person's efficiency as high, but the positive benefits it brings are significant. It is a luxurious psychological pleasure, a luxury that allows us to face life's trivialities without weighing our options or worrying about making mistakes. This kind of enjoyment is crucial to a person's sense of happiness. As Thoreau once said, a person's wealth is proportionate to the number of things they can afford to let go. The fourth point, and the most important one, is that scarcity can lead to a lack of bandwidth. What is bandwidth? Bandwidth refers to our collective computing, attention, decision-making, execution, and temptation resistance capabilities. We need bandwidth to handle daily tasks and think about problems. You can imagine bandwidth as a highway with a certain width, and the number of vehicles that can travel simultaneously is limited. Generally, it can accommodate 7 cars side by side, meaning that we can usually only focus on 7 things at once. If there are more than 7 things, it causes bandwidth strain, the road becomes congested, all the vehicle speeds decrease, and in severe cases, accidents may occur. You might ask, why only 7 things? Can it be 8? It could be, but 7 is just a rough estimate. Think about it. Don't you usually have no more than 7 frequently used apps on your phone? Aren't there usually no more than 7 people you regularly interact with? Aren't there usually no more than 7 places you regularly visit? 7 is generally the threshold that human cognition can handle. Beyond this number, a person will experience significant bandwidth strain, feeling like they don't have enough energy. We all know that the brain can only handle one thing at a time. When there are 7 tasks to handle, it feels like there's not enough energy, leading to fatigue and a sense of powerlessness. When entering a state of scarcity, bandwidth further narrows, like the highway becoming even narrower as we mentioned earlier, entering a focused state and only paying attention to one urgent matter. To a large extent, poor people are poor because of insufficient bandwidth, which often leads them to overlook some essential matters. Here's another example. About 285 million people worldwide suffer from diabetes. Although diabetes is now generally treatable and not necessarily fatal, many people still die from it every year. The reason is simple. These people do not take their medication on time. The same goes for a series of other diseases. Most of the time, severe consequences are caused by patients not taking their medication on time. Studies have found that poor people make up the majority of this proportion, and the poorer they are, the less likely they are to take their medication on time. For instance, farmers know that timely weeding can significantly increase crop yields. But farmers in impoverished areas around the world often don't weed. Are these people lazy? Not really. They are busy planting seeds, watering, and fertilizing. But they are unwilling to do the small task of weeding, which could significantly increase their income. Experimental results have found that poor people have many shortcomings, such as being generally more overweight in the United States. They don't prioritize their children's education, they don't buy insurance, they don't get vaccinated, they don't save regularly, and they don't invest. Is it that these people don't know the importance of doing these things? If you ask them, they will agree that these things are important, but not urgent. They only focus on urgent matters. These issues can be explained by bandwidth. Poor people have narrow bandwidth, and their daily encounters occupy most of their bandwidth, leaving them no energy to focus on long-term important matters. They are constantly struggling to make ends meet, worrying about how to save money, looking for sales, stressing about rent, and scrambling to meet deadlines. In short, their minds are completely occupied, with no leisure to think about how to break free from their predicament. Bandwidth shortages can also lead to a decline in their cognitive abilities. For example, the authors conducted an experiment in which one group of participants took a test without thinking about anything else, while another group was primed beforehand to think about their financial situation and focus on their lack of resources. The test results showed that the first group scored much higher, about twice as high as the second group, indicating that bandwidth shortages can affect intelligence levels. The bandwidth we mentioned supports a wide variety of our behaviors, from judging facial expressions to controlling emotions and impulses. We use bandwidth to read and think. Insufficient bandwidth can lead to a detached and sluggish state. Imagine talking to someone who is simultaneously browsing the internet while conversing with you, always seeming distracted. How would you feel? Would you think that person is cold, abnormal, or disrespectful? The authors found this phenomenon when talking to many poor people, who often have poor sleep, worse self-control, and a tendency to smoke or drink when facing problems, leading to even more significant issues. So poor people not taking medication, not weeding, not buying insurance, not saving, and not investing is because they don't prioritize these things. What poor people truly lack is not time or money, but bandwidth. They need to pay attention to long-term planning, learn new skills, and manage their finances regularly to break free from the cycle of scarcity. From the previous 4 points, it is clear to see how the scarcity trap is formed. For the poor, because they don't have money, all their attention has to be focused on money, and everything in their mind is related to money. Various things about money make the bandwidth insufficient. Humility becomes impulsive, loses control, causing a decline in cognitive ability, making more wrong decisions, such as borrowing, such as overdraft, and finally entering a never-ending cycle of debt repayment. For time poor people, because they don't have time and there are too many things to pay attention to, this will lead to a lack of bandwidth, and the brain reflects all the unfinished, urgent things, so it will always be in a hurry, making it easier to make mistakes. Finally, they will feel that time is even scarcer, which is a vicious cycle. In simple terms, paying too much attention to something often limits one's perspective and leads to a vicious cycle, making it even harder to achieve. This is what we usually say: the more you want to make money, the less you make. On the other hand, if you focus on other people's needs and try to serve others, you will earn money more easily. For scarcity, just like a person smiles when they are happy and gets angry when they are angry, once they enter a state of scarcity, they will inevitably bring a series of vicious cycles. How to avoid this situation? The author gives us 3 tips: save bandwidth, leave some leisure, set reminders. Let's look at the first one: how to save bandwidth. It is to reduce the trivial matters that need to be decided in daily life. Like Zuckerberg, wear the same clothes every day, reducing the hassle of choice. The less you think about trade-offs in life, the better. At least don't argue over a few dollars. Don't waste a lot of time just to save a few dollars. Don't always think about what you lack. Focus on what's truly worth it. Focus on things that can accumulate in the long term. Effectively using bandwidth is a key way to escape scarcity. The second one: leave some leisure. Even if there's no money, some should be set aside for investment, either through regular savings or investment in learning to improve one's skills and cognitive level. Try not to overdraft or borrow. Don't borrow high interest loans unless it is absolutely necessary. No matter how busy you are in time, don't overdraft on future time. Complete the day's work on the day. Always remember that there are future things to do. Also, don't schedule yourself too full. Regular rest is necessary to maintain sustained efficiency. Periodically let yourself relax and do nothing. It's not a waste of time. It will broaden one's bandwidth. Just like the hospital example we talked about earlier, sacrificing rest time is a cost that is incredibly high. The third one: set reminders. Poor people often have too much bandwidth burden, and often ignore important but non-urgent things, so setting reminders is very important to bring back into sight the important things that need attention. For example, if you want to exercise, you need to set a time to remind yourself regularly. If you want to save money, you need to find a way to automatically transfer some of your salary into savings, making neglect become acquiescence, so that life can slowly develop in a positive direction. To sum up, the book presents the concept that scarcity is a mindset, and once this mindset is adopted, it will trap us into the scarcity trap, causing us to focus only on urgent matters and neglect important ones. It will make us have no leisure time, making our work and life inflexible, and it will make us more likely to borrow and overspend future resources. It will also reduce our bandwidth and increase the likelihood of making wrong decisions, ultimately leading us into a vicious cycle of scarcity. If you want to break out of this cycle, there are 3 methods. First, save bandwidth by reducing trade-off thinking. Second, have some leisure time to increase efficiency. Third, set reminders to make important things appear in sight in a timely manner. At the end of the day, scarcity is a mindset, and the fundamental difference between the poor and the rich is the difference in the use of resources and the difference in their own abilities. Sometimes a little change in mindset, a little adjustment in the pace of life, can trigger a chain reaction, turning our life from a vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle. The key is whether or not we want to break away from a poor mindset. Scarcity of resources is not frightening at all. What's terrifying is the mindset of scarcity. Well, these are the highlights of the book, and congratulations on listening to another one. See you next time.